Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we delve into matters having to do with extraterrestrial presence on Earth. Before we open up that domain, I want to just continue my comments, which I started yesterday about the 5 separate fires that are burning in Southern California around Los Angeles. To make a few comments that I think are important for us to take in, not only as concerned citizens, but as human beings on this point of time in our historical journey on this little blue dot, as Carl Sagan called our planet Earth. It's been announced as of just a little bit ago that there's been over 10,000 structures that have been burned and demolished. Homes, schools, churches, mosques, synagogues, civic centers, supermarkets. It's been a swath of destruction, and over 200,000 people have now been called upon to evacuate, and their number of dead, I think, is approaching about a 7, 8, 9, 10. I can't remember. I've heard different statistics. I think in addition to that, the hundreds of wildlife that have been burnt as the fires started so quickly, given the ferocity and the high temperatures of the Santa Ana winds, the severe drought through that part of Southern California. And as I mentioned yesterday, they were saying that the fires were so hot, moved so fast, that if the firefighters didn't get there within the first 10 minutes, it was too late. Today also, it was announced by the UN Meteorological Association that 2024 was not only the hottest year on record after 10 consecutive years of the hottest years on record, and the hottest day in recorded history was last July, 2024. And that, importantly, 2024 cumulatively reached 1.6 degrees centigrade over pre-industrial levels. Climate scientists, as I've mentioned numerous times on Humanity Rising, have told us for decades that if global temperatures go above 1.5 degrees centigrade, climate spins out of control. And we're seeing in LA, as we saw in Spain last summer, where floods killed upwards of 200 people in flash floods like flash fires, and other areas of the world in Asia and Latin America were laid waste due to the scourge of climate change, which is now out of control. As I was reflecting on this in preparation for this session, I caught another news item that in the last 3 days, the Israelis have launched over 100 airstrikes against Gaza, killing hundreds of Palestinians, almost all of whom have been women and children. And that daily children, babies, are freezing to death or dying from hypothermia. as Israel and the United States lay waste to Gaza in one of the most egregious acts of genocide in history. And what struck me is the excess of humanity at this moment. Excess in the profligate building of structures around the world, in the deserts, on the mountains, as if we humans can do anything we want without consequence. And now the planet is striking back. We watch genocide live on TikTok and social media 24/7. And we just stand aghast at the excesses of racism and hatred against a completely defenseless people. As the Israelis carpet bomb northern Gaza and now are bulldozing the entire area of Gaza into a complete wasteland so that they can start bringing in settlers as they seek to eliminate, exterminate the Palestinians. It's extraordinary what's going on this planet. And in about 10 days, Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, having just indicated that he wants to take over Greenland and maybe the Panama Canal. And boy, if those Palestinians don't give up those hostages, all hell will break loose. They're already in hell. LA's in hell. And most fiddle while Rome burns. And this juxtaposition in my psyche, everyone, of 1.6 degrees now above pre-industrial levels, with not a single country anywhere in the world doing anything really about it. They estimated yesterday that there were going to be about $57 billion in damages. Today, they're saying that the damage in the LA fires alone will exceed $150 billion. And we're not even done yet. Who's going to pay for it? How is it going to be done? And then when I think of babies freezing to death of hypothermia in Gaza and carpet bombing women and children as they clear the land, what are we humans doing to ourselves, to the planetary ecology? It hurts my heart at a very deep level today. And I think we need to ponder deeply as we open 2025 the consequences that will begin to accrue, generated not from anything outside, but purely through the unconscious processes of the human psyche as we inflict one self-inflicted wound upon ourselves after another. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. And it's within this context of humanity on the anvil of its own inabilities to even treat each other with civility, to treat our planet as our mother. That over the last several months, the extraterrestrials, the orbs, the intelligent non-human intelligences have been hovering over virtually the entire globe, shutting down Air Force bases, hovering over where the United States has its nuclear weapons, in England and in other countries around the world. Warning humanity to wake up, to stop the madness, and be who we most essentially are, as star beings made of stardust, like the ETs are, and capable of the same level of nobility as all the species we see around us. So today, as we conclude our first week of 2025, we want to continue this deep exploration into this phenomenon that right at the moment of maximum duress is pressing itself upon us with increasing undeniability. So that even the US government now admits what they've repressed for 80 years. And that is that non-human intelligences are with us and have been for some time. And what that means is that the greatest challenge before humanity in this moment is to embrace our cosmic neighbors who've come mysteriously, but with very clear intent to quicken our consciousness so that we can reach a new equilibrium with other sentient beings and the living web of life that constitutes our universe. So thank you for joining us here on Humanity Rising. And I would like to now welcome Sheila Seppi and Barbara Lamb. They have co-authored a book called Cosmic Convergence, which is around the ET phenomenon. They have each written other books in this domain. Sheila is an experiencer. Barbara Lamb is a psychotherapist who has been actively using hypnotherapy and regression therapy of various kinds to enable those who've had experiences with extraterrestrial beings to remember their experiences and articulate them in a therapeutically healthy way, given the reality of our culture that has repressed this information and treated experiencers as if they were either mentally abnormal or psychologically unstable in one way or another. We've touched on this issue a number of times, as you all know, but there's always fresh material that we all are learning as we deepen our awareness of and appreciation for the possibilities for humanity as we establish contact with these beings. So we're going to start with Barbara Lamb, and then we're going to set the context, and then we're going to focus in on Sheila's experience. We'll talk about the book and other things relevant to this topic. But Barbara, why don't you tell us just the story of how a marriage and family counselor discovered the ET issue and how you began this process of using your therapeutic healing techniques with experiencers, and then we'll bring in Sheila.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be with you all, and I think that this is a good note that we're going to be speaking on today because of all the things that you have outlined, and you know, we need a word of hope too. And indeed, we bring some hope to the whole situation. And I will be explaining that. Anyway, I always was a person from early childhood who wondered about reality, that is, aspects of reality that we didn't see. I always had a sense that there was something beyond the physical reality. And my parents, who were very well educated, intelligent people, they really had no idea what I was talking about when I would say, "What else is there?" as I would tap on something hard and physical. And anyway, I just sort of lived with that inquiry in my head as I was growing up. And there was another track too, and that was that I always wanted to somehow be helpful to people. I didn't know how that would be. But anyway, as I grew up and became educated and so forth, and eventually went to graduate school and became licensed as a therapist. And that was very rewarding. That felt totally, totally right to me. And I was thinking of, mainline human problems and issues, which I was working with, and that was very rewarding. But then, as I was doing some traveling to Peru and then to Egypt, it happened in both of those countries that I had a spontaneous memory. That's what it certainly seemed like, an actual memory of having been there in those places as a different person and in a whole different time frame. In other words, I recognized after a while that these must be memories of previous lifetimes. So I became very interested in that whole process of reincarnation, which I had not paid any attention to before. And fortunately, by synchronicity, I met a wonderful woman, Hazel Denning, and she had founded a group, a training group called the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies. And I went to their conference and was enormously impressed with the work that those therapists were doing in hypnotically taking people back to previous lifetimes. So I signed right up for 5 years of training. And then at the fifth session, the final session of that training, the trainer woman said, "Those of you who are doing regression therapy need to know that it's possible that sometime somebody would come to you who's very confused, baffled, troubled, maybe even traumatized by unusual beings coming to them and taking them away for a while." Now, she did not mention UFOs or extraterrestrials or aliens, but she just said simply some unusual beings. Well, at that point, I had never heard of that. This was 1988. And it just really got my attention. I was thinking, what? And then the most outstanding thing was that right after she said that, I heard a very emphatic voice in my head, which was not my voice. And it said, "Pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this." Woo. So I was really stunned. I was so stunned that I never even asked the trainer who had mentioned this in the rest of the 5 days of that particular training module. However, after that, I found myself going to bookstores and magazine shops and doing everything I could to find out information about these visitors, this whole phenomenon, and didn't find very much because this was 1988. But I did go to a couple of lectures at a whole life expo, lectures given by people who were actually working in this particular field. And they were Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, for instance. And I was becoming more and more convinced that, wow, I think that these kinds of encounters must be actually happening. Well, one day in the shower in 1991, I was doing my free thinking and having a lovely time, and just found myself thinking, you know, if anybody would ever come to me for that kind of reason, for these unusual beings visiting them, that I could manage that. Yes, I could handle that, because by that time I had been doing a few years, 6 years actually, of past life regressions. So I thought, well, I could use the same methods, really, although just sort of directing it toward experiences in this life that the person would want to know about. So 2 hours later, after having that thought, I love this synchronicity. I was in a bookstore, and the woman behind the counter recognized me as somebody who conducted regressions in my therapy practice. And she asked me to work with her daughter, a 21-year-old daughter. And I worked with her for 6 separate sessions, doing a regression, each one of those to a different experience that she had had with very unusual beings coming into her at home, and once while driving on the road as well. And the regressions helped her one by one to be less traumatized and to kind of understand what was going on, and that there had actually been considerable benefit to her from these beings. She never, ever would have guessed that. So she had found that she had been healed one night right at home in her bed when she had a very vicious ear infection. And she woke up just enough to see out of the corner of her eye that right by her ear, they had rolled her onto her side, by the way, but she noticed that right by her ear, there were these long fingers coming in and doing something, and she felt some warmth there. And she looked a little further and noticed that there were 3 very tall, very thin, very white, like paper white, beings in white clothes. And they were actually doing something in her ear. Well, she went out of consciousness again. And then when she woke up a few hours later in the morning, she realized, wow, my ear doesn't hurt anymore. And it was completely healed. And another time she had been healed while driving a car with her sister as a witness. That's always good to have a witness. And they were followed by a blue beam of car. This was a daytime experience. And then the car motor sort of petered to a stop, and she pulled off the road to be safe. And the 2 girls got out of the car and ran across a field that happened to be there. And the blue beam followed her, my client, while the sister kept running. And the blue beam hit her lower back, where she had been having considerable back pain for a couple of years. And that blue beam of light felt so good. It was actually healing her lower back pain. And so she just stopped running and just stood there and received it with gratitude. And then the blue beam left, and she and her sister got together again and went back into the car, and the pain remained gone. So she realized, there are some good things happening, even though these beings are very, very unusual. And in fact, she felt so good about it by the time we finished the 6 sessions that she and her boyfriend were going to uh, move to a little cabin outside of the residential area that they lived in. And in other words, the wilderness. And I said, well, being in the wilderness, it might even be more likely that you'll be visited by these other beings. And she said, yes, I know. And my boyfriend and I are really okay with that. So that gave me a lot of courage and interest in working with anybody else who might come along with that sort of concern. I didn't necessarily think anybody else would come, but I thought, well, if somebody does, that's interesting. And then a few months later, another woman was referred to me, and another, and another, and another, and it's just been growing since then. Now it's probably about 3,000 people who I have regressed to, some of the extraterrestrial experiences that they have had. And there was quite a number of clients, particularly in the 1990s, who were coming for one regression after the other over a period of 10 or 11 or 12 years. So that really involved me terrifically. And I am so very pleased. I never, ever would have expected earlier in my life that I would be doing this sort of work, but I'm very, very grateful for it. I have learned so much, and I have learned that there are many, many different kinds of beings who come and have encounters with certain humans, not all humans, I believe, but an amazing amount. Even back in the early 1990s, I think it was 1991 or 1992, there was a Roper poll on the subject of extraterrestrial encounters, and that poll came up with the number 5 million Americans were having these experiences. And of course, we know that people are having these kinds of experiences worldwide. It's not just an American phenomenon, that's for sure. So many, many people have been getting hints as there is more information out in the public about UFOs. And more and more people have been coming to wonder about peculiar experiences that they had had along the way in life here and there, and experiences that they would usually remember, oh, just the first few moments of, maybe 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds at the most, and then they would be out of consciousness and not know if or what something else had happened. So many of the people who have come to me have asked to do regressions to a past experience, not necessarily a really recent experience with these other beings. So many people start by going back to peculiar things that happened in childhood that they didn't understand at all, nor did their parents or anybody. But now, as there's more information about this out there in the public, more and more people are thinking back, gee, that's right. I wonder what really happened that time when I was in the crib and this unusual being looked through the bars of the crib. Or, I wonder what that event was when I was 6 years old riding my bicycle and suddenly it went from sunshine to dark, and I don't know what happened. So, just to give some examples, uh, and many people are having regressions also for experiences that are more current, Maybe they happened last week or last year, and they wonder about them. And by the way, I have heard people say, oh, I heard that there are no more abductions anymore. Well, my experience in working with people shows something very different. That yes, people are still having encounters, and they're having encounters with a tremendous variety of beings, which I've given many, many lectures on, and won't go into too much detail here. But I want to definitely mention that along the way and during all this work, beginning in 1991, um, certain types of people have come to me, and it's opened up even more vistas of reality. For instance, back in about 1992, I was at a conference, a UFO conference in Wyoming, and there was a man and woman talking to me, middle-aged people, and they were talking to me about their daughter, who was age 26. And they were very, very puzzled because the daughter had suddenly one day just changed. Just at breakfast, she seemed to be a totally different person, and yet she looked exactly the same as she had. So they were baffled, and she had suddenly changed her interests from being very materialistically oriented and socially oriented, business oriented. And she was saying she wanted to buy a place and open a metaphysical bookstore, which would have a lecture room connected with it so that she could teach about metaphysics and spirituality. Now, that daughter would never have had that sort of idea before. So the parents were very confused, and knowing that I was a therapist, they thought maybe they could informally talk it over with me. And by that time, I had become aware of walk-ins from another past life therapy colleague who had worked with one and shared about that case. And it occurred to me that maybe this daughter, who had suddenly had such a remarkable change and reorientation in her life, that maybe she was a walk-in. So fortunately, the daughter was there at the same conference, and I met with her and we did a regression. And sure enough, she had done the soul exchange. She was a new soul in that body of the original 26-year-old woman. And that helped her too, to realize that that's what had happened. Because sometimes walk-ins are pretty confused suddenly from a whole different realm. Suddenly they're living in a human body here on Earth and have to get used to everything here about being a human body on Earth. Anyway, I saw that young woman, a couple of years later at another conference, did another regression, and it opened up even more. So she was from an extraterrestrial realm before she did the walk-in experience. She had been an extraterrestrial and living with, of course, fellow extraterrestrials and flying around on a craft and also living on a different planet. And so in one of the two regressions we did, as she was teaching a course in metaphysics in the bookstore that she had opened with the lecture room. She was teaching a nice group of people, and she just happened to glance out the window, which was nearby, and noticed somebody was out there. And it was not just somebody out there, it was her extraterrestrial father who was just paying a visit to make sure she was doing what she came to do by coming to Earth as a walk-in. So she excused herself and went out and had a a brief, happy reunion with her extraterrestrial father. And that brought that heritage all the more to mind. It was kind of a nice reinforcement. So that began my work with walk-ins. And then a couple of years later, I was taken to meet a young woman who was a walk-in. And in her case, she had not come from an extraterrestrial realm. She had come from a spiritual realm and did the soul exchange with a person here, a woman here. And she also suddenly was tremendously different than the original person, who had been a beer drinking, smoking, tobacco chewing, motorcycle rider person along with her husband. They loved that rowdy life. They loved life on the road and having drinking parties. And anyway, this woman suddenly, overnight, was very baffling to her husband, you can imagine, suddenly woke up talking about spiritual things and metaphysical things and wanting to change their entire diet and to change their whole way of living. So as you can imagine, that marriage did not have a really good chance of succeeding, and did within a few months ended in divorce, which happens in many walk-in situations, because the new person in the former body is always so different and very often just doesn't have anything in common anymore, or as Sheila has said, it doesn't have resonance with that particular spouse. There are men walk-ins as well. I have worked with a couple of them. So anyway, there have been a number of situations that I've worked in with a client who came, and we realized during the sessions that that person was a walk-in. Walk-ins are here to help humanity. It's a very, very benevolent thing. And the original person who does the exchange with the walk-in is very happy to be released from this life, because that person had gotten to a point where he or she just didn't want to be here anymore. So it was a relief to be released with a new soul coming in, and that soul could just go right on into the spiritual realm and do just fine and reincarnate again if wishing to. So then, as my regression practice kept continuing, there were people who whom I recognized eventually as being starseeds. So they had not done a walk-in experience. They had been born here, but they were here very clearly for service to other individuals and service to humanity. And these starseeds, the more that we explored who they were and what had happened before this life, we realized that they had all been extraterrestrials themselves in previous lifetimes. And they had volunteered to come here as a human, to live right amongst us, people, be born here, raised here, live amongst us, in order to give really helpful service and enlightenment to whomever they could. And then I was realizing through all of these years, from the early 1990s on, that there was a huge hybrid reproduction program going on among many of the extraterrestrial species, and that there were many, many ET human hybrids who were living on the spaceship with those beings. And then I realized after quite a number of years of realizing that there were some hybrids living here as people living amongst us. I stumbled across that actually at one of the major UFO congresses, huge conference. And I just met a woman and immediately looked at her beautiful eyes, bigger than usual eyes, and looked startled. And she said, "What? Like, why are you looking at me like that?" And I said, "Well, you remind me of a hybrid." And of course, I didn't know what the reaction would be with my saying such an outrageous thing. And she smiled and looked me in the eye. And she said, "I am a hybrid." And that was Cynthia Crawford, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But she was here giving wonderful, wonderful service to anyone who would possibly find her. And she was making sculptures of a whole variety, about 20 different kinds of extraterrestrials. And she was channeling exactly what they looked like as she was making these sculptures. And she was selling them for a period of several years. And these sculptures were remarkable. People who bought them often gave her feedback that they were getting messages from the statues, even when they had never gotten messages in any way before. But the statues seemed to have a remarkable consciousness about them and would give messages and would be very helpful to the people who bought them. So anyway, I thought, wow, this is a remarkable person who seems to have extraterrestrial genetics. And she had found out about that, about how she had come into being. And then a couple of years later, another woman was brought over to me at a big UFO conference. And I immediately said to that woman, "Oh, you remind me of a hybrid." And she smiled and leaned forward and said, "Yes, good for you for recognizing that. I am a hybrid. I am a Mantis hybrid from planet Estegan, which I had never heard of at that time." And I got to know that hybrid woman very well. She stayed with me for about a week, and I took her to a conference that I was speaking at, and they even gave her a chance to give a talk as well, which was particularly nice, a sort of a surprise extra for that conference. Anyway, I was able to witness her paranormal and psychic abilities. She had lots of them, and she was communicating with animals, pets in my neighborhood, and we were getting feedback from the owners that what she was picking up from the animals was really true about those particular animals. And anyway, it was a wonderful thing knowing about her. I still am in touch with her quite a bit. And then I was invited to go to a group of people in Southern California, in the Palm Springs area, a group of people for a 3-day weekend. And those people were all ET human hybrids. Now, ET human hybrids are born here, but previous to their being born, they were given genetics from extraterrestrials. And with the hybrids I know, most of them were given genetics by not just one species of extraterrestrials, but by maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, in Cynthia's case, 6 different species or races of extraterrestrials. And so they are given that in terms of the embryo being made by the beings, an embryo being made from sperm taken from a man and eggs taken from a woman. Usually it's a married couple, and then combined on the ship with extraterrestrial genetics, making an embryo, and then that embryo is planted in the woman. And so there are two ways that this can develop from there. The woman might be one to carry the embryo for about 2 months, 2.5 months maybe. And then by the beings, it is removed, usually unbeknownst to the woman. She's sort of in an altered state as this is going on. Anyway, that embryo is removed and put into a glass tank of special fluid on the ship and is gestated there until ready to be quote unquote born and removed from the ship and raised there on the ship. And that type of hybrid will remain its whole life on the ship, living with other hybrids and living with the extraterrestrial beings who gave their genetics to this mix. Now, the other part of the phenomenon is the part that I have been more familiar with in terms of knowing those people. And that is that the same mixture of sperm and eggs and extraterrestrial genetics, making an embryo placed in the woman's womb. And in this case, they will let that baby develop full term, as we do with our babies. And then those babies are born here. So they are hybrid, but they're born in the regular way that we are and nurtured and raised in exactly the way that we humans are. And they live their whole lives here on Earth. And they have a lot of differences from other people, although they look like regular people, but they have a lot of psychic abilities, paranormal abilities. They feel the density here differently than we do. They feel it's too heavy, it's too dense here, depending on which species they have a mixture of. And they, from a very early age, they have telepathic ability. They see auras around people. They have healing abilities and a full range of psychic abilities. So they grow up here in society, in a family, and everyone I have ever met who is a hybrid, quite a number of people now, and they all have a sense that the family that they are born to is somehow not their real family, and that their real family is out there in space. And they miss that family, the extraterrestrial family. They are also visited very frequently throughout their whole life from very earliest times. They're visited by the beings who had given them their genetics. And they feel like those beings are really their true family. They exchange a great amount of love, not exactly in the way that we do, like a child cuddling in its parent's lap and doing a lot of hugging and all of that, which we humans do. But still, there's a lot of love shared in a more unconditional way rather than in a physical way. And so those hybrids have a whole lifetime of continuing contact with their original extraterrestrial family as they are going about life really serving here. So in all three of these types of people, beings, the walk-ins, the starseeds, and the hybrids, they are here to help humanity as much as they can. So the ones I know do a lot of things like consulting with people in a grander way, a more expansive cosmic way, and a spiritual way. And they are giving seminars, podcasts now, lectures, doing writing, sharing publicly more and more as we have more and more modalities for doing that, which is really wonderful, the internet and so forth. And so they're just here helping individual people and helping public groups of people as well. So I'm really wanting to emphasize that helpful part, particularly, Jim, with what you said about what's going on in the world, which I am extremely concerned about as well. And it's very gratifying, at least for me, and hopefully for others, to realize that it isn't all bad. All those things are indeed happening for sure, but there's a lot of good happening too. And you see, the beings who have sent the starseeds, the walk-ins, and the hybrids, they would like to help humanity too. There are so many good kinds of beings out there in other forms. There are some that are not so likable and helpful, but there are a lot who are very unconditionally loving and helpful with wonderful intent. And so it's just very helpful, I think, for people to know that there is this good out there and here too. So
Yeah.
those beings, you see, would like to help humanity. A lot of them are very, very concerned, as you said yourself, about humanity, about the earth itself and climate change and everything happening here. And they cannot live here. They cannot tolerate our environment, our bacteria, our viruses, our density, even our total physicality. And so, since they can't come and do it, they managed to send these other three types of people here to do that work for them. So, I mean, I think that that is wonderful. I think that that is really good news.
Well, Barbara, thank you so, so much. This has been, you're like an encyclopedia.
Yes, when I think of all the cases, I mean, 3,000 or so people, each one
Yeah,
having a
yeah.
different experience, is
Let's
just
get Sheila in. Sheila, are you still there? Let's bring Sheila in.
Hi.
Uh, you've just co-authored this book on cosmic convergence, and you yourself are one of the beings that Barbara just described. So why don't you take a few minutes and comment on what Barbara said, and then make any additional comments about your own life, and then touch on the book. And then we
Sure,
can have a
absolutely.
conversation.
Absolutely. So, as far as my history goes, I was always a very sick person. And I had been diagnosed with a plethora of diseases, bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia. I used to walk with a cane. I had erythema nodosum and sarcoidosis. And honestly, at age 38, my life was in a downward health spiral. And I went to bed a very, very sick person, depressed, very sad, because I had three small children and I couldn't even play with them unless I was laying on the couch. And so, what seemed to me as 7 o'clock in the morning, it felt as if someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of the head, and pulled me bolt right up in bed. And then it was like lightning ran through my body. And then I was in white space. Now, I don't know how long I was in this white space, but I know that for the first time in many years, all of a sudden, I was out of pain. I felt very, very much at peace, and I was filled with this unconditional love that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. But the next thing I knew, my peripheral vision was coming in and then my frontal vision. And as I sat there in the bed looking around, everything was the same, but everything was different. Now,
Mhm.
I did not know that in that instant, I had become a walk-in soul. I did not know. And if you had told me that, I would not have believed you because I didn't believe such a thing could be possible. I started having past life memories that I did not believe in before I went to bed. I started having all of these universal truths running around in my head, which are some of the things that I wrote about in the book, Cosmic Convergence. And all of a sudden, I started remembering healing modalities that I'd never studied. I instantly became clairvoyant, claircognizant, clairsentient. I had all of the clairs. Everyone in my life noticed. My personality totally changed. As I said, I was instantaneously healed from all of those illnesses. And in the
Wow.
personality changing, it was, I mean, extremely phenomenal. And then it took me many years to be able to really anchor that energy of being the walk-in because I had no foundational knowledge for what had happened to me. Now,
Let
this
me,
was,
let me just ask you a quick question.
of course.
I'm interested. So if I understand what a walk-in is where an old soul, like you were just indicating, and then all of a sudden a bolt of lightning. Did you retain your old personality, or
No,
did
absolutely.
everything change? Because you're a new consciousness in the same body but healed, and the consciousness in the old body, your spirit, Ka, if you use the Egyptians,
Mhm.
went into the other realm. There was a switch. Is that
Correct. There was a switch, and not only was there a switch, because I had been in the spirit form and was part of a collective that was actually here working on the crystalline grid by reverberating light codes out to help with humanity's ascension. Only a small portion of that could come in. Now, most people would refer to this collective as the oversoul. So when I initially came in, I came in just bringing little dribbles of my Arcturian self. And I had to do that to not fry the biology or the neurology
so?
because
It's a gradual process. I mean, it's
for
literally walking in.
at that time, it
Yeah.
was for me.
Nice.
Sometimes it's instantaneous because you also have to remember the mechanics that operate this biocomputer, which is the physical body, is the spiritual bodies. So everything in the spiritual bodies has to be changed out, as well as the chakra system where we receive information. And so this happened for me over a period of time. Now, when I was in the bed, when that new soul came in, that's what propelled me upright in the bed because the old soul was so weakened. It did not even have the energy to leave through the top of the head, which is traditional. It was propelled out through the heart center, which is where the soul lies anyway, behind the heart. So it was propelled out through the heart. And from that moment on, I was a completely changed person.
Extraordinary. And that's consistent, Barbara, with your experience with other walk-ins, that it's both instantaneous, but also a integration over time. So the physicality of the body doesn't get fried,
Right.
basically.
Yeah. And so in the book, I also wrote, I have a full chapter about walk-ins, about starseeds and hybrids, and Barbara has contributed a 5 to 6 case studies about different walk-ins, starseeds, and hybrids. But then the front of the book talks a little bit about that universal knowledge that I brought through because the collective that I come from is Arcturian, Pleiadian, Andromedan, Mantis, Sirian-Lyran, Angelic. And so I have a lot of that information that has
So,
come through.
so let me just stop you once again.
Of
Uh,
course.
so you know enough about the lineage coming in to know that it was like an ET mongrel. It's a
Well, what
bunch of different
happens
strands
is,
of ETs.
okay, so if this is the oversoul, all of these fingers are our multidimensional lifetime. And at any period, we can have 12 existences occurring simultaneously. Well, think about this, Jim. We're eternal beings. So, how many lifetimes have we accrued over eternity? Okay. So, when this occurs, when the soul leaves the body, all of that information comes back up through what is called the Shantias Khan, which is like a miniature cloud storage for the spiritual bodies. It has all the information from the soul and that higher self stream. And so all of that repository of information is here and it comes back up into the oversoul. So when a new incarnation occurs, there's this swirling of information that
Gotcha.
comes down. And so you never know exactly what you're going to bring through. Now, at this time, I'm serving as the embodiment of my full Andromedan self. I only needed all of those Arcturian aspects long enough for this physical body to really attach to this holographic grid and to be able to make all of those changes. So in my case, I was a complete soul exchange. However, there are instances where you have an augmentation of a soul, where you have an infusion or you have a merger or you have soul aspects that jump in and out. And so there are a plethora of type of soul experiences that are taking place that people may or may not be aware of, but I do talk about that fully in the book.
And our walk-ins, I mean, I want to bring you back in on this one too, Barbara. Were you aware at that time that you were a walk-in? In other words, did you all of a sudden, when you got up out of bed, realize that you had been there'd been an indwelling and that your identity was different? I mean, it's sort of like when they do these heart transplants. The same person will sometimes get a whole new personality and remember events from their childhood that never happened to them
Right.
in
And
in
that's
their body, but the heart of the other person remembers. I mean, how did you readjust your identity as a walk-in? How long did you take to figure that out?
Well, what you're referring to is the cellular imprinting. Now, when I entered the body, there was already cellular imprinting because I entered into a used car, if you will. And so I had to come in and clear out all of this cellular imprinting before I could fully imprint. But just that small amount of the new soul energy that was in a higher vibrational frequency or resonance was enough to heal this physical form, which is, very exciting because that's how energy medicine works. But for
Right.
me, it took a period of years for me to really be able to clear out things. Now, I came from a religious background. So a walk-in was never even conceived in my mind. I had never read a metaphysical book
Yeah.
to that
Right.
point, and I had no knowledge about what was occurring. But I did have enough psychology from college to think I was having a psychotic break. I mean, what,
Oh,
what else do you think?
yeah,
I'm ill, I'm sick, I have a dysfunctional marriage.
yeah.
Everything must have just been too much, and I must have had a break. And that led me to find my first spiritual teacher, who is of Hopi lineage, because
Gotcha.
she
Gotcha.
was a psychologist. She was a therapist, and she listed herself as a spiritual counselor. And I thought, oh God, that's exactly what I need.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I went there fully expecting to get the little blue pill that I could pop and everything go
It's
back
gonna
to
be
its nice dysfunctional order. But instead, I was opened up to a universal possibility that allowed me
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah. That's
embrace
what Barbara does. She
that
opens
which
them up.
I am.
Okay. Let me ask you another question, both of you, because the critics, the skeptics,
Mhm.
say, well, abductions and and hybrids are a violation of human rights because the human being, in this case, Sheila, was minding her own business. She may be in pain, but nobody really asked her permission to do this. So this is one of the factors or interpretive frameworks they use to try to get us to be afraid of this phenomenon, that it's a
And that is
violation of human
human.
sovereignty. How would each of you answer that question?
Yeah, I will just say that is a human framework. From the soul's perspective, everything is already written in the pre-birth plan. And what we would think of as an
Good.
abduction, we would never in a million years agree or offer to do that in our human forms. However, for the soul's purpose, that very group that may have abducted someone could also be a race of beings that you're from, or it could be a race of beings that you have been working with, that you are continuing some type of work to find out how a human being responds with genetic material, if they're a hybrid, a new soul, if they're a walk-in, or how it wakes up a starseed and how they're able to transmit information back to their own planetary system or planet. And so there are many, many reasons why abductions occur. And there are many reasons why, in our human form, we would say, no, 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 that is a total violation because
So it's a
I
matter of the context that you use to interpret the experience. From a personality level, I didn't give permission, but at a soul level, you not only gave permission, but you've been waiting for it for some time.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Barbara, what would you say? You have to take yourself on mute.
Yeah, that was being so
About
considerate.
this kind of human rights question that you often hear about abductions. Well,
Oh,
they
yeah.
didn't ask
Oh,
anybody. This is a violation of human rights.
absolutely. Well, particularly from the point of view of somebody who experiences these encounters with the other beings. They wonder, why me? I mean, that's a very typical question, of course. So when we have done a regression to why me, why have I been chosen for this? Or very often they'll initially think, why am I picked on in this way? Um, anyway, when we've gone back to the source of that, it's taken us back to their soul experience of just getting ready to come into this lifetime. And before we come into this lifetime, um, in most cases that I know about, anyway, I think this is very typical, that we have kind of a little gathering, kind of like a little committee, and we're discussing what will be the purpose of our going into this lifetime we're just about to go into. And what are the main things that we are going to be working on, let's say, the different themes that we're working on, different kinds of experiences that we're going to have for experiencing and learning, which all helps to evolve the soul. And so in that planning session,
And this is happening in the etheric realms.
yes, in the etheric realm
So there
before.
was a committee, in effect, Sheila, that made a decision to send a particular aspect
Yes.
of cosmic reality into your body.
Yes.
And did they do it out of compassion with you? Did they look down on the earth and oh, there's Sheila Seppi and she's in a a really bad state. Why don't we fix her up? I mean, is it that prosaic, or is there something more cosmic and reincarnational and all of that?
Well, the first thing that I would like to say from our perspective is we're only here for experience and to expand our soul's growth. So when we
From the ET
operate
experience, they've come into the human
for a
form to
soul,
gather more experience.
a soul is a soul. We all go back to source. We are all collected. There are not human souls, ET souls, only until the individuation aspect. And so the Sheila Seppi this is just the vehicle. This is the form for the soul to be able to operate, to experience, to provide source the opportunity to have this experience, because we all, as you go up the ladder, if you will, we all are part of the source energy. And then we individuate to have these individual experiences. The individuation occurs over eons of time. And so in this collective, it was decided that I would be the aspect to come in to imprint on the physical form and to assume this lifetime. And the experiences that I have had are those of great compassion, of unconditional love, of being a parent, because my poor children, they didn't even have a mother that could really interact with them properly. And so when I came in, all of a sudden they were thrilled because they themselves had a mother that could do things and go with them and take them to school. And, it took me a while to remember about packing lunches, but to be able to pack lunches and all of those kinds of things, whereas before they weren't.
Yeah. So, and then the old Sheila, where did it go? It
She's
went back up into the oversoul, or where did she, is there a purgatory, or is there a heaven and a hell, or how does that all work in your experience?
So I can tell you from my memories, there is, well, in the higher astral realm, there is a place, heaven or paradise. You have to realize when we're in human form, that which we think, that which we believe, that which imprints upon us, when we leave, that's what we experience. So if someone thinks they're going to die and go to hell, they're going to die and go to hell for a short period of time till they're like, well, wait a minute. I'm creating this. What the heck is going on? Okay,
Yeah.
Class over, okay?
Yeah.
Then there
I
are
took the wrong pill.
That's right. That's right. Then there's other people who will believe straight into heaven, and they will go there and experience that until there's a knock on the door and they're like, hey, Jim, come on, remember, we got work to do. But remember, we also go through that soul review. So at the end of this life, we have this soul review, and my memories of the soul review, there is not a God standing there with a finger saying, you should have done this or that. We are the ones that create our soul review in with our collective, with the angelic beings that we work with those guides who have been supporting us. We review every single aspect. Now, remember, number one, there's nonlinear time. So we go through the birth process, and in my case, it'll be from age 38. We go through that process to the end of our life. And not only do we examine every action, word, and deed that we participated in, we also look at the ripple effect. How did this affect my family? And not only how it affected them, how did they feel? And we experience their love, their joy, their pain from everything that we have participated in this lifetime. And so that's why, with my students, I'm always saying, garner your thoughts. We are co-creators. And so you really have to be mindful of the words we speak, because also remember, our bodies are 80% water. And so when we speak words, we're also imprinting on our cellular structure. Our thoughts are imprinting on our cellular structure, and then we become that which we think, that which we eat, and it helps to move us. But for people who are concerned about an afterlife, this is the dream. We talk about astral traveling at night and going and seeing. That's the real life. This is the dream.
This is the
Is
fantasy. This is the simulation.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are all
Wonderful
this
point.
is happening in the mind of source. And so everything, as real as it is, also is holographic in nature. That's why when I do work in a holographic field of someone, change can happen instantaneous. It's like, oh, let's move that wire here and this one here, and now you're good to go. Okay. But everything, when you look at it from the soul's view, this experience is absolutely phenomenal. It's like the most ultimate theme park, in the world. You get to experience love and pain and joy. You get to experience everything. And the more that people experience this love and joy, the more they imprint onto the collective consciousness, which is what we were doing. And hundreds of thousands of millions of other beings are doing every day of every moment. A negative thought goes into the collective consciousness, it goes down. A positive thought comes in, it starts to come up. And only when we imprint those positive vibrations does the collective consciousness rise as a whole. And then that pivotal point, the great shift that we all talk about, then begins to occur. But that also has to be in tandem with Gaia's vibration. My collective is a 7 density collective. We are no longer in form. Up to 6 density, you will have form. Gaia herself is in the process of leaving the planetary state to where she herself can choose to stay with her consciousness in the new earth, or she can choose to put it into a star. And as we rise in our consciousness, the entire ladder of our existence is about working ourselves back into that source energy. And
Gotcha.
so Gaia will then become a star. She'll become a planetary system. She'll become a universe. She will become an omniverse. And then she herself will go back into the source. And then we start it all over again because eternity is a long time, my friend. That's why I tell people, if you think we sit around drinking cappuccino on clouds, you are sorely mistaken.
Yeah.
It's just one form of work and soul expansion after another.
Yeah. I was thinking I was going to sit on a cloud and play a harp.
And you can for a while. You'll get to do that if that's what you choose to do. But, eventually there's that knock. Hey,
Yeah.
Jim. And here's the cool thing. You get to take the Jim personality with you. You never lose that which you have created in this lifetime. Because coming from the oversoul down through the Shantias Khan, this is that higher self stream that attaches to the physical form, which creates the soul. And
So
so,
let's get prosaic here. How does this happen? So you have a man and a woman having sex.
okay.
The egg and the sperm unite to create a zygote. Is that the moment when this comes in?
No.
Does it come in through the sperm? Does it come in through the egg? How does that up there connect with little baby Jim
Okay. So what happens
or
is
Sheila or
when
Barbara?
when the egg and the sperm come together and begin to create the human form, that human form, as that fetus grows, whichever soul has said, you know what, that would be a really cool experience. I can go down and clear some ancestral lineage for those folks, and I can bring my soul wounding into this experience and clear that for myself in this lifetime. So they pick and choose who they want to come to, but they begin a small amount of imprintation and then the soul leaves. It visits again and imprints on the cellular structure and then it leaves. Because not only do you have the cellular structure, you also have the epigenetics of the soul. And when the two of those come together, that's what creates
The
Jim and the
epigenetics of the soul. I love that.
epigenetics of the soul. Yes.
So all the way along in your understanding, there's the biology of my father and my mother producing little Jim.
Yes.
But there's also this epigenetics of the soul that comes in from this other realm to kind of interbreed or interweave with
Yes.
with the egg and sperm DNA, as it were.
Yes.
So
And
we're a mixture of inherited characteristics, father, mother, etc., and then also cosmic interweavings for a higher purpose for which the whole thing's happening in the first place.
yes, absolutely. And then, of course, the infant itself is born, and even when it is in the womb, it is being pre-programmed because the operating system is in the subconscious or that reptilian brain. And so what happens is through observation, children up until about the age 7, 8, they're looking outside of themselves to see how other people operate, and they're beginning to develop their own behavioral patterns. And those patterns then are what run this program throughout our life and how people respond to those programs. So when I came in, I had all these programs in here. Okay, there really wasn't a whole lot of room for the me that is. And prior to incarnation, my collective is called the Yah-knee, and I am Nawaila. I am one aspect. We're still connected. We're one. So when I speak, they speak, etc., etc. And so when we came in, first, our agreement with this soul is we would begin to clear up whatever was remaining in the cellular imprinting. There were behavioral patterns that needed to be cleared. There were forgivenesses that needed to occur. There were actions that needed to take place. So first, we began to clear the cellular structure. Next, we began to imprint our soul epigenetics into the cellular structure. So now, having been here 20 plus years, then now almost 25 years, now this body is my body because I have the genetics from the mother and the father, to whom I'm very, very close. I'm here with my father right now. So we have the epigenetics of the parents, but we also have the epigenetics of the soul. And because I know who I am at a soul level, I do my best. Now, I'm still as human as the next person, but I do my best to always remember that I'm a soul having this human experience, and therefore try to operate from that soulfulness. And so when we talk about the horrific events that occur on this planet, yes, they are horrific, but I'm putting my attention over here to clearing that horrificness. I try not to give any attention to that, because when I drop into fear as the human, like I'm very near North Carolina, I passed right through Asheville and I'm like, oh my God, the devastation. Why aren't these people? And it's like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I'm dropping into fear. I'm dropping into despair. I have to put my attention over here and see the new Asheville. I have to see that new family unit that
Good
has,
point. Good
I
point.
have to look at the new housing and opportunities that have come out of this. Because if I drop into that despair, I'm feeding into the collective consciousness and I'm lowering it. And that is not what I'm here to do. Now, do I drop into despair? Absolutely. Do I eat too many cookies? Absolutely. I know sugar is a poison.
Especially during the holidays.
I'm as human as the next person. But I do have that little ticket,
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm punching my ticket again. Yes, I'm a soul having a human experience.
Wonderful. Boy, this has been
Well, and
sensational.
we all are a soul having a human
Yes.
Yeah.
experience. It's just that you have more reason to be aware of that.
Yeah, and more conscious of the reality as
Right.
opposed to unconscious
Yes.
of the reality.
Yes. Yes.
'Cause I never forget in college, one of the things that I noted in one of the books I read by Freud, he says, in the act of birth, we forget.
Yes.
We
Right.
forget the universe, he said. We forget the universe, said Freud, in the act, in the
We forget
process
that
of birth. And
we forget
you,
that
the
we're all
walk-ins are
soul.
people who have been enabled to remember. It's like getting an upgrade.
Yes. Well,
Right.
to an extent, because let me tell you, I have people that come to me all the time and they're like, I want to remember everything. And I'm like, no, you don't.
No, you don't.
You don't. You do
Trust me.
not, because you get a blank slate when you come here. You get to
Yeah.
have a pure human experience, and you add that to your repertoire of, oh yeah, I've been Pleiadian, I've been Andromedan, I've been this, I've been that, da, 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 and I've been a human. Okay, it's very important here on this planet to be able to live as a human, to experience humanity as its fullest as well as to integrate that spiritual part.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. Barbara, do you have any final comment before we wrap up?
Well,
I mean, as someone who's seen a lot of walk-ins
and a lot of other
and a lot of others. Yeah.
definitely. Well, I just wanted to go back to the soul agreement, that when we were a soul just getting ready to incarnate, and we have that sort of overview or discussion about why we're coming into this lifetime, for which purposes. Okay, into that planning session, this is according to some regressions that I have done, that into that planning session, there comes the souls of other beings. We call them extraterrestrial beings. And they're talking to this soul that's just about ready to incarnate. And the extraterrestrial souls ask that soul, in your lifetime that you're just about to go into, would you now and then cooperate with us, be part of our program? And the soul that's about ready to incarnate agrees. Yes, I will do
Gotcha.
that. And just like all the other things that we have decided to do when we come into this lifetime, all the different themes we're working on, kinds of experiences that we have chosen that we will have, and we forget that. At least I think most people forget consciously that when we're here as a child and growing up and living our lives. And we forget that agreement that we had made with the other beings as well. So
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
done regressions and that sort of thing has come out. It really makes a difference for that person to realize that on that level, the soul level, lo and behold, they never would have guessed this, but there it is, that they had actually made an agreement to have something to do with those beings and to cooperate with whatever the program is on the part of those beings. So that really, it really helps the person to realize that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can just feel your vibrancy, Sheila. You're just your esprit de corps, the dynamic nature of your personality in relationship to that poor, broken, depressed woman on the couch, afflicted by all manner of physical ailments.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're a testament to the reality of what Barbara just said and your own narrative. And so, well, listen, I would love to have both of you back because this has been a very deep dive into the ultimate mystery of the extraordinary miracle and multidimensionality of what it means to be alive.
Right.
I'd love
And
to come.
what we really are as souls,
Yeah,
ongoing
yeah, exactly.
souls. So
Exactly.
in
Exactly.
my work, it has come out quite a bit here and there, that even though the person is a human who's come to me for work, um, that it becomes apparent sometimes with some people in this work that they have been a number of different extraterrestrial species in previous lifetimes. They may have also had many human lifetimes
Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
well, but maybe it could be that all of us have a lineage of having
Absolutely.
been
Absolutely.
various types of
Absolutely.
extraterrestrial
Absolutely.
beings.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so,
thinking the two of you ought to do a course for our certificate program in ET awareness and communication. I'll be in touch with you as soon as the session's over. But in the meantime, let us retire to the after chat. Barbara
okay.
and Sheila are going to join the after chat for a few minutes. You'll see the link in the chat box Stan just put in, and you received the link in your Zoom reminders for today. But this has been dazzling. I'm telling you,
Good.
this has
Well,
been absolutely dazzling.
your response, Jim, your enthusiasm is absolutely wonderful, very gratifying for me, and
This
that's
is the future. This is the future. This is what we all need to be understanding about the true nature of reality.
right.
Yes.
To have brought it in a very gracious and elegant and profound way. So I thank you. I thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks so much for the invitation. It's really, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to share this type of content with people, because so many people themselves could be a walk-in, or they could be a starseed or a hybrid, and they just don't
Don't know
realize
it.
it.
Yeah.
You don't know it.
Great stuff. Great stuff. All will be revealed, everybody. All will be revealed. We're in a time of apocalypse. Thank
Right.
you, Barbara. Thank you, Sheila. And then on Monday, everyone, we're going to have Veda Austin, the woman that works on the water from New Zealand. I had a chance to have a dialogue with her, and we'll be airing that on Monday. So that's Monday with Veda Austin. Thank you both. Have a good weekend, everyone.